to our non-existent listeners. Welcome to the first of hopefully many. We're going to call this series or this group of podcasts or discussions rather Philo Talks.
Philo Talks, yeah. Sounds good.
It's a play on words because Luke's not comfortable with anything that's not a play on words.
Yeah.
So that's why we went with that. So basically, Luke's going to tell us why we're here because people are probably wondering that.
Of course. So me and Shant have been friends for quite a while. And we've always kind of had the same kind of interests, especially when it comes to philosophy and talking about things of the universe that doesn't come up in everyday discussions necessarily. And one of us had the bright, I can't remember who, one of us had the bright idea, listen, why don't we record this and put it out into the internet? which is exactly what we're doing now, without much more thought than that. And a very, very small setup. And we thought it's actually more, we were discussing before, and it's actually more for our benefit than it is for yours, because it's hard to keep track of a 40-minute conversation on the 22nd minute.
Yeah.
You start forgetting what you were talking about in the beginning.
It's true.
So this is to keep us a little bit more focused when discussing ideas of the universe, ideas about society, where we believe society should be. Shanti's an avid anarchist.
Am I?
A little bit more.
We'll find out.
A little bit more than I am, and I am more towards. I think capitalism is doing a pretty okay job, but there's still a bunch to fix. And then I mean that would be our economic opinions, but I mean we also agree on other things like the meaning of life and where do we draw value from, and and I think the end of it is actually what we're trying to do is bring the conversation that is philosophy and bring the idea of this complex, this huge thing that we feel is only reserved for the elite few of us who understand large words, and bring it to more of a it's a
put yourself inside that group of people who understand large words.
No, I don't. That's what I'm saying. Shanti studied philosophy, but I don't. I'm 19. I've read 3 books on philosophy and call myself a philosopher.
Yeah.
And that's what we want it to be. We want to start these conversations in the sense that it's an everyday conversation that I mean we think is important to have. I mean, a majority of our conversations happen in a car or over a few beers. Yeah. And so it's not something that's hard. Philosophy is actually just the act of thinking with structure. Yeah. More than anything else.
So, that's the point of it, right?
Yeah, that's the point.
For us to think think with a little bit more structure than normal. Not to say we won't discuss things. In fact, we'll probably discuss things more outside of these parameters than in them.
Yeah.
I think. But I think my feeling about the best way to go about this is we'll speak to each other more, because I'm not a radio presenter.
No.
I'll never claim to be. My voice probably sounds terrible electronically. I don't know because this is the first time we're recording. So we'll speak to each other in the same sense that we.
Our usual conversations. So a lot of our conversations will happen. I mean, we I don't know if you guys know about this, but there was a conversation between Jordan Peterson and this guy called Slavoj Žižek, butchering the name. But it's something along those lines, and basically they had a big discussion. It was capitalism versus communism and happiness, and understanding all those different complex ideas. And it followed a more structured in the sense that they each had 15 minutes to address each other's argument. And that's not really what we're going for. We're going for more of a conversation of sit down and discuss things.
Yeah, just a dialogue.
Yeah, like almost like I would probably categorize it as a commentary on thought.
Yeah.
We're commenting to each other in a discussion about what we're thinking about. And usually that's how ideas evolve. I mean, we had a fantastic conversation the other day, which we didn't record, which I wish we did, because I remember saying something that was so profound, and I completely
surprised yourself.
I surprised myself. I had to repeat it to let it sink in, but obviously I've forgotten it now, which I think basically that sums up what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. Is
capture that experience, and also for documentation, and it's fun, and we'd love it if so maybe the single person listening to this talks to their friend and says, hey, listen to this, what do you think about it, let's discuss it. And we'd love to have conversations like that. I think we have a few people we'd love to bring on. people
Yeah,
would like to
definitely.
discuss
I
with.
think I really have a few people in mind that would love to like pick their brains when it comes to different topics. But yeah, speaking of topics, I think Luke said, well, you said that there were a few general topics, you know, like basically the universe, like our place in it, so a little bit of metaphysics, and then, but often we will end up bringing it back to current affairs and talk about like what's going on in the world right now, especially because living day to day, those will be the things on our minds, like things we've heard in the news or things we've read about,
and that's what we want. Like philosophy is an everyday thing.
Yeah, we want it to be
rooted in
more
reality.
practical, and that type of thing. Yeah, so I don't know about you, but I actually ended up reading some stuff today because I didn't. I wanted to remind myself of what I thought, which often changes. I think it does for a lot of us. But I was reading up on idealism again, which I went through 3 years of philosophical education at university. More actually, but I did 3 years of courses, and idealism came up briefly, especially when we talked about Kant and how he had probably inspired a lot of idealists.
Is that how you pronounce it, Kant?
Kant, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
you don't want to butcher that one.
No, that's a difficult one.
But yeah, in that sense we discussed it. But I honestly, I was a bad student. I won't lie. I didn't study that hard.
Student, but I don't study. That's
Both of us are. We have that similarity in that, you know, we'll do what we need to do to get whatever needs to be done.
Because
But
if we
maybe
don't
not.
care, then it's what's the point, you know?
Exactly. But anyway, that may be the reason why I didn't really know what idealism was until like recently, and I've kind of reminded myself, and then we had a short discussion about this a while ago, just talking about things like that. So I think idealism is a really interesting philosophical topic.
You want to just run me through what idealism is? If
Yeah.
someone doesn't know.
Sure. So idealism, from what I understand, is it's a school of thought that's quite broad, and it's actually split into a lot of different categories, especially in postmodern philosophy. So like modern day philosophy is like, it's very split up, and the conception about idealism these days is that you can't be an idealist and believe that a material or objective world exists. So basically,
so basically, like the innate nature of a function is the most important thing, and the physical aspect doesn't necessarily matter.
exactly. So
But
not even, it goes further than
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the conception these days goes further than that, and says, well, it's not even real. Like anything outside of our minds is not real, right? Now, it's actually idealist arguments are actually really sound. They're not. It's not like it's crazy. It might be something shocking to hear if you're hearing it for the first time, but if you delve into it, it starts to make a bit more sense.
Yeah.
Problem with idealism is, I think, a lot of us, parts that a lot of us, especially grounded in classical materialist conceptions, and like we,
So does it
a lot
matter?
of us, yeah, a lot of us are into science, and like we're into like, you know, like, yeah, we like to call ourselves realists, and we're concerned with like real problems and that type of thing. Your idealist is more your classic philosopher who's like very involved in their own thought.
But now, so from where I approach like, so now I believe idealism. It's an interesting topic to dive into, and it's 100% where philosophy, I think, loses a lot of listeners, or a lot of people will lose their train of thought when discussing idealism. Though I think it's something super important to think about. It's the normal conception of the abstract thinker is an idealist.
Yeah.
Like someone who sits and gets lost in thought every single day.
Exactly.
And loses reality, and then just becomes the man who sits on the mountain who believes it's the most important thing, which arguably is correct. Arguably, idealism.
Maybe
the problem is that he's probably right.
Yeah.
But the thing is it's unless you approach it from a slow gradient, if you dive into idealism at its like at
Yeah.
its apex or at the very depth of what it is, it's just flies over your
Yeah.
head because you haven't gone through the process of deconstructing your realistic
Exactly.
or your addiction to what is real.
Yeah.
Which is okay, because I mean we have to live in reality in order to go anywhere in life.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, I mean, for me, I have to ask myself the question: is like postmodernism, is it a train of thought in philosophy that should exist outright? Should there be postmodernism, because it's basically just a extreme fracturing of philosophical thought into minutest ideas.
Yeah.
Where if we go back to the greats of philosophy, they used to paint with very broad strokes.
Yeah.
All right. While it was a clear concept, it was very broad, the topics they covered, and that's kind of where I lie in the philosophy. I don't mind arguing the minuscule details.
So that's a good
Objectively.
point actually, and something that just for anyone who's interested in getting a nice, concise breakdown of pretty much any philosopher or any philosophical concept, go check out the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It's GoPro stopped recording.
Okay.
That's okay. It's free and online.
Has it been recording the whole time?
So we just lost the GoPro there for a moment.
Okay.
But
We're back. Part 2.
yeah. But anyway, I was reading. I refer to it quite a lot because it's written out in quite an easy to understand language.
The Stanford.
Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Okay.
And yeah, it's online. I'm not sure what's happening. We're just gonna leave the GoPro off. But yeah.
GoPro's off. Audio only.
So what I was reading in there, I was reading about Karl Marx. I was looking and reading up on a few things about his life. Actually, not much to do with his philosophy, but
I would like to just interject.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting that so many Germans were great philosophers.
yeah,
I think it's quite
Weird one,
it's quite an odd one that a lot of where we see great philosophers come from is like the same period in Germany.
yeah. There was a period.
Like a renaissance in a way.
There was like
It
a
was also
200-year period.
it was a post-French Enlightenment. It was kind of
Post-French Enlightenment.
It was the 1700s, and then all of a sudden Germany churned out like. But then Voltaire was also from France. And
Yeah.
I mean, well, I guess it's just the development of Western thought was basically that.
Yeah, there was.
I think we should definitely dive into German philosophy. I think that's
Yeah,
an important note.
that's a good topic.
Well, I guess any great philosopher. I mean, there's also a ton of amazing Asian philosophers, but I don't read Chinese, so it's difficult to get their ideas if you can't speak the language.
Well,
philosophy of language is also an incredible thing to dive
so
into as well.
philosophy of language, definitely, probably a whole podcast or whole recording by itself.
Whole season, yeah.
And quite dense, so hard to get through even.
Yeah.
But just going back to picking up on that thing you said about how those philosophers, especially Western philosophers, in that age of like strong German philosophy, it was very broad concepts that were painted. And the thing I was going to say that was in the Stanford Encyclopedia was that they were like the author of the article was saying, like Karl Marx never made an argument explicitly saying that capitalism was unjust.
Yeah.
And it's made people so confused.
Yes.
In
what was the communist revolution was basically made Karl Marx a god, all right, which was very wrong, and Karl Marx would have disagreed with the way he had been treated post revolution in Russia, because basically what happened is that he became Karl Marx is the epitome of what we are. This is everything, but they misinterpreted a lot of what he meant. He was very much just like, this is kind of what I want society to be like. I mean, it doesn't have to be like, but the things
not
of value.
even. So that's something that was something I was reminded of today. I often catch myself thinking exactly that. I'm like, especially as someone who believes in a lot of like socialist principles and like
we're both socialist and okay, let's get it right. Both socialist. We're neither far left nor far right, but we believe in equal rights. And
Well, I like to believe I'm quite radical left, but
I'm definitely not.
but anyway, those if you agree with socialist principles or whatever that type of thing, you
basically just
do
humanitarian.
end up looking human rights. You do end up looking at Karl Marx's kind of like it's the moral like handbook for how society should be, and it reminded me reading this because I hadn't actually read actual Karl Marx literature for a while now.
He was quite good at expressing ideas.
He was, and he actually wrote a lot in English, and that's his German books
German,
are well translated.
Yeah, I was reading up on him as well.
But it reminded me that he didn't really have a moral philosophy. There wasn't a moral philosophy at all, and it was more like Karl Marx off the bat is a full-on materialist determinist when he looks at the universe. Like the universe,
He's a very practical philosopher.
like practical to fault.
Yeah.
Like it's a like the universe is how it is, and economics and things and politics go through waves, and basically the final wave is this big upspike of capitalism where there's ultra production, ultra surplus, and basically the surplus is as a result of like exploitation of workers to like oversimplify it. And when that spikes too high, the next wave is the wave of communism, and basically communism ends. It's the end of the cycle, and it takes the world into this economic and political utopia where there's actually, he never said this, but it seemed because he didn't have a doctrine for what was just or an unjust economic system, that it would just be a system that didn't need a judicial system to be like, well, that's wrong, you shouldn't do that. People just wouldn't feel the need to do wrong by anyone.
I mean, it's basically Karl Marx described a society where everyone had everything they needed to live, but could work on things if they wanted to. So you could specialize in something if you wanted to, but it was entirely your choice. Basically, he was saying is that society gets to such an incredible place where production becomes automated. You always have food, you always have a place to sleep, and you can chat to any of your friends you want to at any time, which arguably is what we all want. The point is that probably you could argue that the communist revolution came too early because there wasn't a surplus. That capitalism surplus hasn't happened, and I would argue it hasn't happened yet either, because even to this day, because each of the world is developing at a different rate. So to paint the planet in a thing, my argument would be basically we would have to go that way, because eventually it doesn't make any sense not to, because we'll all be on the same page. We're not all on the same page yet. That's why it's not really working at the moment. But that's Marxism. That's a very deep. This is a very deep rabbit hole.
What you're saying is, I would say like it couldn't get more. Couldn't say anything more Marxist than the fruit like isn't ripe. You know?
It's not your
and
own.
It's
the same thing with the UN. The UN was the same thing. The UN was a fantastic concept that came around, but not at the right time, but wasn't necessarily built on. And where they laid the foundation for a fantastic thing that they then became the European Union, but now it's falling apart, and now bringing back these massive ideas of everything back to reality, where the European Union is breaking up because there is a rise of populism. And this is a huge thing I want to chat about in the future as well.
Populism
is a huge topic, because what it actually is, in the very root of it, is exactly what Plato, when he wrote the Republic book, stated back in the day, when he said what's going to happen in society is that when you have movements of extreme acceptance, there's people who get hurt and don't voice their opinions. All right, and these people get more and more hurt in their small little pubs, in their small little groups of community, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, the top aristocrats, because that's what it is, the top 5%, top 1%, gets more and more distance from the population. And so what happened originally is that was originally a dictatorship. So, let's go back 200 years, it was the normal imperialism system, right, where the king and queen got so far away, the feudal system, all right, then that collapsed. Then we had democracy. And now the reverse is happening. Populism is the reverse of democracy, but it's the same revolution. It's the same thing where there's a large group of people who feel unfelt for, and you could even track it. I would argue that we could track it by generation, where every 3 generations the same thing happens. There's a generation that fights, the generation that changes, and there's generation that goes back. And I would say it ebbs and flows, because if you look at the French Revolution, the same thing happened, where there was a war, and all of a sudden there was the Enlightenment movement. Yeah. All right. Then going back to Nazi Germany, and before that it was the Russian October Revolution. Now what we're seeing with Trump in America is the same thing. It's the same thing. I mean, I'm not comparing Trump to Hitler or Trump to Lenin, but the point is it's a powerful populist leader that is communicating to a vast majority of the population that is, I would describe as undereducated, misinformed, and who are being preyed on by the media to incite ideas that prey on feelings more than proper thought. And that, I think, in of itself is exactly what we're trying to discuss, is that philosophy is the act of thought separated from feeling and with structure.
Yeah.
Is that, yes, you can feel certain things, but as we know of any of us who's in a relationship, if you make a decision on how you feel about something before properly thinking through, you can mess a lot of things up. And I think that scales perfectly to a country, because at the end, a country is a huge group of people who are individuals working in a collective, and it's a wild animal, and so you have to. I think that's also something. So populism is something we're going to discuss. Propaganda, huge thing. I was listening to, so there's some interesting videos on understanding social media and understanding your part in the media, where you can't just listen, or you can't listen not actively, because all of a sudden it sticks in your head and you don't realize. I would argue that the entire Midwest of America aren't bad people. They're not race. I mean, yes, they're racist, but it's the argument is more they just don't know. And it's the same thing for a large portion of Germany and the Nazis, or a large portion of Russians, is that these people weren't intent on hurting other people. They just wanted the best for themselves.
I mean, that is what populism is, right?
Exactly.
But
even
going all the way back to where you started with populism, or when we started, just got into that topic.
Yeah.
So it's, I personally, my opinion, I think we agree, is that it's a big problem. I mean, it's not a positive thing. Maybe it's natural, but it's not positive.
No.
My big question, though,
something that should have been solved, I feel like.
My big question is how did it come about? And before you respond to that, you said something about how it's kind of like working against democracy, or it's opposite of democracy, something like that.
But it's not necessarily. Yeah, democracy is just a product. But yeah, I think I know where you're going with this thought. But
so, for me, I wondered about it, and I was like, what is it? What is it that allows populist, especially political populist movements? There's a lot of different ones. You know what? The environmental revolution is populist to a certain extent.
Yes, very much so. I'd argue. But it's good. It's a good one.
Exactly. It's grounded in
correct.
A lot of facts and this type of thing. And most of us believe it's positive. But it's the question still remains. I think our postmodern world, i.e., the fact that we have these this idea that we live freely, and we have a vote, and we have human rights, and we're allowed to do things. You know,
everyone's equal.
The whole point of the 20th century is we were discovering our rights. Okay, maybe not me and you.
Yeah, okay.
White men probably had a lot of rights for a long time.
Let's agree. Okay, this is two extremely privileged individuals discussing problems that we have no idea. But we're just going to try. We're going to try.
Yeah.
So don't crucify us for trying.
What I mean is absolutely. It does come down to identity politics.
Yeah.
But
we're trying.
But it's like we went through this. It's become a culture. It's a part of everyone's lives, probably all over the world. This idea, almost false idea of freedom, where we're free enough to kind of glimpse happiness. We can see something that resembles happiness to us. But
Zizek said something interesting about that in the chat as well.
He did, yeah. But we can't really grasp it. And I think
which keeps us hungry.
We
feel
have this,
that
exactly.
And it gives it like
So
a rat race, yeah.
it's an environment where you've got a majority of the population not quite satisfied, let's say, with this conception in their head that they have the power to change their lives.
And this creates a huge thing of the dream, the falsehood of the white picket fence in America. Where
Exactly. It's
depression
the American
100%.
dream. The American dream is the
100%
perfect product to sell.
Exactly. Hollywood.
But you can sell anything, really.
Yeah.
You know. So like, and it is exactly. And I think my argument my starting argument would be that the neoliberal consumer culture that allows us to sell even concepts to people
And houses.
And then houses, yeah.
I'm a real estate agent, by the way.
And like the fact that we have democracy
Yes.
in Western countries, which provides us with this false conception of freedom,
Yeah.
then allows us to follow people like Trump.
Yes.
And
Because he's a product of the system, but
Exactly.
it's a flawed system to allow a product like him to arise.
Exactly.
Because we assign the value of intelligence to something that doesn't necessarily reward intelligence.
Yeah.
Like being a good salesman doesn't necessarily mean you're a smart person.
No.
Or being successful nowadays, I mean, just look at any kind of media sensational pop star.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily intelligent people. But now, I don't mean intelligence in the sense of cannot add or subtract. I mean intelligence in the sense of enlightenment from the French Revolution, because I would argue there's a difference between your intelligence of meaning of ideas and understanding a concept separate of yourself, almost emotional maturity plus intelligence, separate from your ability to see opportunity.
Yeah.
For instance, I don't argue that Trump or Lenin or Hitler or any populist movement or Justin Bieber or Kim Kardashian or any of these massive social media conglomerates, or I don't argue that they're smart people or not. Do I think they're intelligent in the sense of understanding their impact in a positive sense for 20 years from now for humanity? I believe that is a different kind of intelligence that we haven't touched on as a society yet.
Yeah.
Because you can be a smart person, but are you intelligently acting as a role? Are you spreading an idea that is going to actually move society forward? Or are you a populist where you like people supporting you, so you're just keeping doing what they're doing to support you? Like Logan Paul is a fantastic example. And even if you look at the evolution of PewDiePie and Logan Paul, like PewDiePie coming from a populist thing, now if you watch his content now, the separation that he has gone through is almost an exact where he's a satirical comedian commenter, where he's changed his way and he fully expresses it, and he's had an explosion of support now because of that.
Honestly, I don't
you
follow.
You don't follow us. But
know.
I mean, for other people, I mean, it's just throwing names out there. But understanding that there's a difference between like intelligence in the sense of understanding the greater concepts, or are you focused on immediate self gain? I guess that's what I meant.
And there's maybe something in between, because
I guess,
it's like, for me, like
size,
just thinking of an example now is like take the Bush Junior administration, where Dick Cheney to a large extent was the instrument of action in that administration, and you look at someone like that who was an incredibly intelligent in the classical sense person.
Like bankers are intelligent people, but are they necessarily like?
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
So taking someone like Dick Cheney, he wasn't a specifically intelligent person. He wasn't specifically brilliant.
Foresight.
He wasn't specifically brilliant at university or anything like that, but he was brilliant in terms of strategy, brilliant in terms of political maneuvering and controlling people's thoughts, powerful people's thoughts,
which
in
is
Parliament,
probably
right?
the most important sense of intelligence.
You take someone like that, right, who by all means, on paper, is a great statesman, but still manages to, in my opinion, obviously we all have our own opinions, steer the world in the wrong direction. Still, like, there's an element of self-gain, 100%.
Yeah.
But there's this weird thing, and maybe it comes up in America more than other places.
America just publishes
But
it more
it's
than
like-
anything.
it's like the pursuit of like you said, there's still a lack of foresight, even in brilliant statesmen like
John
that.
Lennon as well. I mean, look at John Lennon and trying to see where he became so focused on the finicky things in the communist revolution that he lost sight of the future and allowed things like
Vladimir Lenin.
Vladimir Lennon. Sorry, John Lennon's a singer.
John Lennon would
My apologies.
sing us a song.
I'm dyslexic, but Vladimir Lenin, the same thing, was so focused on the minuscule that he almost lost the foresight. We actually had this discussion about revolutions earlier, where revolutions at a certain point become self-serving. Like, you forget the greater picture, and then because you're an activist and things like that, and you have to make compromises. But that's also, I think, revolutions is another thing to chat about. We're really brushing over basically everything we've ever spoken about in this chat.
But it's fine. Maybe it's good for the first time round to just
100%.
brush over topics.
Yeah, because I mean,
it's
we
probably
need to
quite
dive
annoying
into
to
Marxism.
listen to. I won't lie.
Yeah, this is probably just us babbling on, but you're gonna get a taste for it.
But definitely all these things discussed are probably discussions within themselves. We've got to dive fully into with some proper research, and think about what we want to say about them. But it seems like, just looking at what we've both jotted down so far, it's a lot of political interest.
I think so. Yeah.
I'd be interested, like, what topics.
I guess
Non-political.
I guess the reason it's come out as political is because they're great examples.
Exactly. And
But
modern day stuff.
so bringing it back down to the human being, because at the end of this, I mean.